2005 wasn't, by today's standards anyway, a particularly interesting year. Nowadays, no full orbit around the sun is complete without the entire fabric of society being altered and about 300 celebrities suddenly dying. Back then, Tony Blair won a third election, Daniel Craig was unveiled as James Bond, oh, and the Pope died, so actually not that different, I guess. Anyway, 2005 was a weird one for WWE. Business was falling and creatively the company was definitely struggling. Case in point, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit were supplanted as champions by Triple H and JBL, and neither, for obvious reasons, ever got into the main event picture again. The likes of Cena and Batista were earmarked as the future, a number of low-key classic matches emerged from otherwise underwhelming booking, and, well, the whole Viscera the Love Machine thing happened. Let's call it a mixed year. Still though, you already know about all of that, so what about the stuff you didn't know? Well, glad you asked, because my name is Adam Cleary and these are 10 things you didn't know about WWE in 2005. Number 10, Matt Hardy had major heat with The Undertaker. Not to trudge all of this up again, but Hardy was released from WWE when he went public about the affair between his long-term girlfriend Lita and Edge. However, upon seeing the support he was getting online, WWE rehired him for a worked-shoot feud with Edge. A feud, it's worth pointing out, that was designed to put Edge over and not him. Anyway, after eventually moving to SmackDown to put the whole grisly affair behind him, he'd seemingly had one burial too many and ducked out of a decking at the hands of a returning Undertaker, bailing out of the ring when he should have been eating a chokeslam. Big Mark here, never the forgiving type, was absolutely furious. He confronted Hardy about it backstage and chewed him out in front of all the boys, calling him disrespectful and asking him who he thought he was. As punishment, he was promptly booked to face JBL at Armageddon, where he was pumped harder and faster than your dad in that Benidorm knocking shop before getting pinned. Number 9, Paul London speaks his mind to Vince McMahon. Bad things happen. With all due respect to Paul London, he was never likely to make it big in WWE. He was small by the standards of the time, had an unconventional ring style and a laid-back attitude. That he was able to pull together such a great tag team run with Brian Kendrick in 06 is actually a huge achievement. However, following his arrival in the company and after being underutilized despite his obvious talent, London decided to voice his frustrations to Vince McMahon. The boss duly listened and, after a period of deep introspection about how he views smaller workers, rethought his entire booking strategy and had the writing room come up with something to help push him to the moon. Oh god, I'm kidding. I'm obviously kidding. He lost the Cruiserweight Championship to Nunzio, got booted down to Velocity, and was then even stripped of his 450 splash finisher after Vince decided moves like that were just, too dangerous. It was over a year before he found any relevancy again. Number 8, WWE tried to sign UFC's Mike Goldberg to replace Jim Ross. You remember, you do, don't you? Remember Vince McMahon firing JR on national television and then the next week airing the ridiculously awful Dr. Heine skit with his hand up? Yeah, you remember, don't you? Well, I remember that too, despite my best efforts at suppressing it, and long story short, Vince wanted to hire a newer, younger, more photogenic announcer. Thus, he fired JR and then went immediately after UFC commentator Mike Goldberg. WWE offered the 39-year-old a multi-year WWE contract to be the lead play-by-play man on Raw. It was reported at the time that Goldberg had accepted, but those reports turned out to be false. Goldberg himself said that while the offer was extremely overwhelming and he had a great affinity for WWE, he had been in UFC for so long, he really wanted to see where they were going. To this day, he regards it as one of the hardest decisions he's ever had to make, but also probably one of his best, which, given what happened to JR and his colon and Vince McMahon's arm, is probably right. Number 7, Juventud Guerrera had nuclear heat backstage. Cast your minds back a minute to me telling you that Vince McMahon banned the 450 splash because he thought moves like that were too dangerous. You remember that? Well, that's because Juventud Guerrera nearly broke his neck doing it, so everyone else got their toys taken off them. He was fired in January 2006, and that absolutely shocked the entire locker room because they couldn't believe he'd somehow survived 2005. He was allegedly constantly late to shows, had a huge ego, and would pitch ridiculous ideas to management. Par exemple, he wanted to do mask versus mask with Rey Mysterio, despite him not actually wearing a mask. The final straw came when he was told he would be losing the Cruiserweight Championship to Kid Cash. Rather than just, doing his job, he then sandbagged Cash and gave him a flurry of needlessly stiff shots. Vince had seen enough, showed him the door, and the rest of the locker room did a very, very quiet hooray. Number 6, Heidenreich and Snitsky versus The Undertaker and Kane was planned for WrestleMania. For much of 2004 on television and pay-per-view, The Undertaker and Kane were lumbered with Heidenreich and Gene Snitsky. As two veterans, it was up to them to try and get something respectable out of the rookies, but let's just call a spade here, my friends. All the matches were bad. Fans looked on in horror as the heels formed something of a team. And alright, yes, the "I like what you do to babies" line was quite funny, but show me a single wrestling fan who was excited about their matches, and I will show you a liar. WWE's plan, inexplicably, was to do this combination as a casket tag match at WrestleMania 21. However, after A, The Undertaker protested very loudly, and B, someone in the writing room apparently stopped sniffing glue for 5 minutes, the idea was canned. Taker battled Randy Orton in a banger, and Kane went into the Money in the Bank ladder match. Everyone was happy, except for Snitsky and Heidenreich. Number 5, Matt Striker was kicked out of the SmackDown locker room. You've actually got to hand it to Matt Striker. Here I am, physically handing it. Fired from his job as a teacher because he kept calling in sick so he could take wrestling bookings, he then just walked into a job with WWE. He was doing fine on Raw and Heat, but incurred the wrath of SmackDown's locker room when he worked a dark match for the brand in early November. Striker remarked to a road agent that he felt Raw was the more professional of the two locker rooms, and that he preferred the atmosphere on that show. Presumably missing the irony of this entirely, JBL, Chris Benoit, Hardcore Holly, and Eddie Guerrero then went ballistic when they got wind of it. Benoit got so mad that he threw Striker's bags out of the locker room and ordered him to change in the hall. Amusingly, for a former teacher, Striker learned precisely nothing from this until Bob Holly threatened to beat him up. Number 4, the Blue Meanie threatens to sue WWE following One Night Stand. At the close of the infamous One Night Stand pay-per-view, the even more infamous WWE vs ECW brawl broke out. JBL threw sheets to the wind and, angered that the Blue Meanie had once called him a bully in an interview, then went and beat the actual piss out of him for real. Well done, John. That'll tell him. With footage of the attack obviously caught on tape, Meanie considered legal action against both JBL and WWE, but instead settled on signing a short-term deal with them in order to score a cheap Stevie Richards and Batista assisted win over JBL on the July 7th episode of SmackDown. He made another appearance at the Great American Bash, and then after that, he was gone. WWE smartly getting him into the ring after the assault would undermine any future legal action he decided to take, no doubt saving them and Bradshaw an absolute fortune. Number 3, DDP sued JayZ over the use of the diamond cutter symbol. Is this right? When Diamond Dallas Page left WWE in 2002, he pretty much quietly retired save for a brief TNA run. Set for life thanks to his main event time in WCW, he set up his yoga business amongst some other things and just pretty much got on with his life. However, he did make national headlines when he sued JayZ in December 2005. After claiming the rapper had stolen his diamond cutter hand gesture. DDP alleged that by having Jay and the other artists associated with Rockefeller use the symbol, they were confusing the public, who all naturally associated it with a pro wrestler from the late 90s. The pair settled outside of court, which, in my imagination at least, was a really, really hilarious brunch. Number 2, WWE opened negotiations with Brock Lesnar. Alright, so a few facts for you here. Number 1, Brock Lesnar left WWE in March 2004, immediately following WrestleMania 20. Number 2, he did so because he planned to make it as an NFL player. Number 3, he did not make it as an NFL player. And number 4, the man had spent money like nobody's business, meaning that by 2005 he was no longer a wealthy person. He wanted to get back into wrestling, but problem was he had signed a no-compete clause in order to obtain an early release from his WWE contract, meaning he was tied until 2010. He sued, then they countersued, but amazingly in 2005 the pair actually sat down and started talking about bringing him back. WWE even went so far as to publish a story about this on their website, such was the confidence they had in it working out. It didn't, of course, and the two parties would continue to spar legally before Lesnar finally returned in 2012, some 6 years later. Number 1, the Ultimate Warrior got them pistols out and started shooting. Now, it's not a secret that the self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD was specifically designed to bury Warrior as a worker, a character, and a man. It's also not a secret that he was absolutely fizzing after watching it. Anyway, I could spin this out into a fulfilling narrative, but instead I'll just tell you what he posted on his website after WWE asked him to appear on their show Bite This. On Triple H, he said, "It's a good thing Vince backed off the drug testing when he did, because without them, you wouldn't have made a muscle grade sufficient enough for the real freaks to even let you be one of their friends." On Bobby Heenan, "You are dying, diseased on the inside, and no more time is left to get back any of the integrity that matters. Imagine what it will be like lying there, taking in your last breaths, knowing you hoard yourself out your whole life." And on Jim Ross, "I can only imagine that a whole hell of a lot of anal pressure must come with being one of Vince's top asswipes. You are obviously jealous of the fact that I never let Vince bend me over." Anyway, long story short, he did not like that DVD. So there you have it, those are 10 things you didn't know about WWE in 2005, read to you by a man who thinks that might be the year he finally got to touch a pair of boobs, but can't quite work it out. Anyway, let me know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching. I have of course been Adam Cleary, I think it was 2004, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.